Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another short war summary. And today we're receiving some very big news about Russian vessels firing on civilian ships heading to Ukraine as they were trying to make it to the Ukrainian ports. This is a very big deal. Right now it appears that the ships weren't actually fired upon and instead it was warning shots instead, but nonetheless that is a very big escalation of the Russian blockade and it looks like they might actually be enforcing it now. So we also have some other news as well about fires in Moscow as well as the Kerch Bridge news also. So let's go ahead and jump right into our first news article here, and this one is from TASS. And beware because this is a Russian media source and we're going to debunk something that they left out in this post. It says the Russian naval ship Vasily Baikov forcibly stopped the Palau-flagged dry cargo ship Sukhur Okan heading for the Ukrainian port of Izmail for inspection, reports the Russian MOD. And while this is in majority true, this is the story of the blockade that I mentioned a moment ago. They stopped it, they inspected it, that is true, but they left out the part about firing upon the vessel around it to make a warning shot to make them stop. It just says forcibly stopped, and they're leaving out the most crucial part about them firing their guns. So here we see the Russians admitting to that. So let's go ahead and jump into our next news article here, which gives us some more context. And this one is from Fitux News. It says the Russian military opened warning fire to stop a cargo ship under the Palau flagged en route to Izmail, Ukraine, and the vessel was inspected before being allowed passage through, says the Russian MOD, and that was reported by RIA. So a different source here has a different piece of information about it, unlike TASS. So obviously it's a very big escalation to start opening warning fire. Up to this point, we have not seen the Russians open any type of fire on any civilian vessels. We haven't seen them enforce the blockade to the large extent. And in fact, we saw an Israeli vessel make its way all the way through the blockade and to the port in Ukraine without any trouble. And the Russians were unwilling to stop it then. But now it apparently seems the Russians are willing to enforce that blockade. And it's unclear at this point whether or not they just chose this one particular vessel to stop, or if they're going to continue doing this into the future and actually board and inspect each one of these ships. Also, we don't have many details about what happened during the inspection. The Russians being thugs, they could have taken or rummaged through everything the vessel had, but we don't know that for a fact yet, but I wouldn't put it past the Russians. So, not good to see that they're actually boarding vessels that they have no right to be on because they deem it to be a military threat. So, not good whatsoever. But moving on to our next post, we have one from Flash News Ukraine. And it says the Russian army has resorted to new tactics in the Black Sea after strikes on Russian vessels, and the Russians have created barriers of civilian ships to protect their fleet, says the spokesperson here of the command, and occupiers are still hiding behind the southeastern coast of Crimea, and the main thing that has changed is that they formed a so-called ship inspection area where they gather civilian ships, and they are creating a barrier to avoid being damaged by the attacks. And here we can see some more pieces of the puzzle to the inspection area that has apparently been formed by the Russians to board these vessels going through the Black Sea. It appears that they're hiding behind the southeastern coast of Crimea, and apparently they're jumping out and basically storming these ships and forcing them to stop. We've seen that in one instance, like we said, but we'll have to wait and see if it happens in others. But once again, the Russians are changing tactics, and that's a kind of a shock because usually the Russians don't learn. But in this instance, they have changed, and it looks like either Putin or the Kremlin is putting major pressure on the military to actually carry out this blockade. So let's wait for more news to come out, and we'll have to reserve some judgment on this, but not good to see. Moving on to our next article here, we have some news about the Kerch Bridge, and this is also from Flash News Ukraine. It says traffic on the bridge is blocked again, according to Russian media, and local residents are urged to remain calm and follow the instructions of the so-called transport security officers. So here we can see that the Crimean bridge, which has been targeted by Ukraine many times, almost 4 times in the last day, has been blocked once again. It's unclear why, but Russia is telling folks to remain calm, even though the situation is not under control very clearly, or they wouldn't be blocking the bridge again. And I doubt the Russians are going to adhere to that advice. Actually, understandably so, because the Russians are not instilling confidence at this point. So we'll have to wait and see if the information comes out indicating whether or not the bridge was actually damaged or destroyed in this section, because we still don't know, and we still are debating the fact as to what happened to the bridge yesterday. The Russians are being very strict about what's coming out about the Kerch Bridge. So with that, moving on to our next news article, we have one from Visegrad 24, and it says a major fire has broken out near the Zhukovsky International Airport in Moscow. And in this video right here, you can see that it is a very large fire right near the airport. A lot of black smoke going up into the air, and it is definitely a big one. So We gained some more context as to what this is in the next post, so let's go ahead and jump right into that one. And this one is from Nexta, and it says, rescuers began extinguishing a burning warehouse in the area of Moscow. And let's enlarge this video here. Here you can see the fella here in the overalls inspecting the damage. He's out here being a good Russian, looking and seeing at the fire. Knowing how it works, that's probably the guy that probably started the fire. But over here you can see that there are some pallets of some kind of material. It's unclear exactly what that is. It could be fertilizer or some kind of maybe flammable substance. It's not really clear. Obviously something's on fire, so that could be a good reason for that. But it's a very big one, and these firefighters with that small little hose, you're going to have a very hard time putting that out. So that is the information we have on that right now at the moment. So let's move on to our next news article here, and this one is from Nexta as well. It says Poland is going to deploy a barrier of American Apache attack helicopters and Abrams tanks to protect the Brest corridor, says the defense minister. And the Brest corridor is a piece of land about 80 kilometers wide and on the border between Poland and Belarus. And we've known for a few weeks now that Poland is beefing up its border security. They've sent a lot of troops to the border, but now they're sending some very potent Apache attack helicopters to the border, as well as Abrams tanks. So that's about as beefed up as it can get for the border, and they're sending those there now. That will surely deter a lot of Wagner or a lot of people from actually trying to cross the border, because they don't want to be gunned down by one of the most fierce fighting helicopters that Poland has to offer. So a big move by Poland, and they're taking action to secure their border. So with that being said, let's jump into our next article here. It is from Ukrainska Pravda in English. It says partisans set the Russian base in Mariupol on fire, says an advisor to the mayor. And without jumping into the story, because I do have all the details pretty much here, it's not too many details. Basically, the partisans jumped into the base, they set some stuff on fire, and some ammo stores got caught on fire and also destroyed. So nothing major, but once again, it indicates that the Russian partisans and the public are getting very upset with the war, and they're taking it out on these Russian bases. We've also seen they've taken it out on the recruiting offices as well, but that's happened a few days back, and we haven't seen anything since. So now they've resorted to going on bases. So with that being said, let's jump into our next article here, also from Ukrainska Pravda in English. It says there was a firefight between the Russians near Mariupol, and casualties are reported. And right here you can see the clown emoji, and that is probably warranted because these Russians are definitely clowns. They're shooting and killing each other before they can even get to the front lines. Or if they're at the front lines, they're still shooting and killing each other no matter where they are. They don't discriminate on that front. But we can see here, if we click on the article, that it says the firefight took place yesterday on the 11th of August in a temporarily occupied Urzuf near Mariupol with the participation of the Kadavarites and the commandant's office. So once again, getting in a bad fight, typical for the Russians, and they are not united because they're fighting an unjust war. So who would have guessed that? But anyways, jumping into our next article here, we have one from Nexta. It says beaches were officially opened in Odessa for the first time since the beginning of the war, and they also had to install nets against drifting mines. So, very beautiful beach, by the way. Nice rock here as well. It says Villa Otrada on it. It's very tropical, very nice looking, nice resort. And it's good to see that the Ukrainians are back out and enjoying the beaches. Sadly, though, they have to keep an eye out for those drifting mines. You wouldn't want one of those to float up on you while you're out there enjoying the water. That would be a lot worse than a shark coming up on you. But, you know, lovely to see. Very beautiful water, and makes me want to go to the beach. Lucky Ukrainians. But moving on here to our next post, we have one from Ukrainska Pravda in English. It says Russia begins using domestically made Shahed UAVs against Ukraine. And we saw before that Russia was building a facility to build these Shahed drones, but it appeared like it still had months left on its development, and it wasn't quite ready yet. I'm not sure where these have been built. We don't have that detail yet, but somewhere in Russia they are building these in small batches, and it looks like they're putting them on the front lines. So not good to see, and that could get ramped up significantly when the Russians finish the other facility that will manufacture these drones on a wider scale. So not good, but also Ukraine is beginning to manufacture their own drones as well, so this could end up being balanced out between the two countries. And finally, moving on to our last article of the day. This one is from Ukrainska Pravda in English once more, and this is a bit of an odd one, and a kind of a goofy one. It says passenger plane from Norway flies over Ukraine despite closed airspace. So this aircraft took off from Norway, and it was heading to Turkey, and apparently it flew straight over the no-fly zone with Ukraine, which is extremely dangerous. There has been instances in the past where passenger jets get shot down over Ukraine, and now that they're in a full-fledged war, that was incredibly stupid, and I would assume it was probably a pilot error and not intentional. I would guess, I would hope. But 180 people were on board, and every single one of those people's lives was in great danger, and luckily they made it through without being shot down. And funnily enough, the airline that operated it, I'll click on this article to make sure it's accurate, it was called Freebird Airlines, or Freebird Aviation or something like that. Let's see if I can find it down here. Let's see. I don't see it in the article right off the bat, but I read it earlier and it said Freebird Airlines or something like that. Funnily enough, that's kind of an ironic name for it because they were trying to be Freebird right over the most dangerous war zone in the world right now. So they're very fortunate they made it across without any problems and didn't get shot down. But with that being said, that is our last piece of news for the day. I hope you found this video informative, and also if you would, please press a like on the video and subscribe as well. It helps us out tremendously and you can get regular updates. Also, if you want to support the channel, you can go to our Patreon link in the description below and support us over there. That helps us to keep these videos going and also helps us to fund equipment purchases, etc. to continue making the news. So once again, thank you all for watching, and also peep the Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @It'sTheEnforcer, and we post daily updates as they happen minute by minute over there on our Twitter. So once again, thanks for watching, and bye-bye for now.